welcome to our editor. Woo! Episode 34, baby! I'm Katie.
I'm Garet. I also love that this is the lead up to like a very serious
Oh yeah, it's
Katie's been doing creative interpretations of movie themes this morning, and then cracks a joke about everybody having a yeast infection right before we go into this very serious, intense topic.
To be fair, the yeast infection had nothing to do with the music scores.
That's true. They were separate sidetracks.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Don't put that on me. I'm not a weirdo. Anyway.
About this.
Thanks to all of our new listeners. Love you, miss you.
Welcome.
Follow us on Instagram at The Bars Ankle High. We have merch at bit.ly/anklehighmerch.
Also known as Bitly.
Also known as Bitly to some. Links to all that are in our show notes as well as including, I don't know, there's probably a smoother way to say it, but there's also a link in the show notes to our Patreon if you want to join Patreon.
Our Patreon's so fun.
I do.
We're gonna have an episode with oh no, I'm forgetting the time. It'll already be up by the time this goes up.
Yeah, it will have come out the week before this episode airs.
Yeah.
So it will have just come out.
Yeah, we did that one right before St. Patrick's Day. That was one of my favorites, I think.
It was really fun. I'm excited to listen to it because it hasn't been edited yet, so I only hear it after it's been cleaned up a bit.
Yes. After some of the well, those don't get edited a ton, so
no, it's all the yeasty bits are included.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that.
Now you're welcome.
Gross, the yeasty bits.
So that's, I think, all of our housekeeping stuff.
I think so.
Yeah. So this episode was suggested to us by our Patreon member, Shrimply Pebbles, Instagram friend, who I think will be changing their handle soon to a cat's cloaca, or whatever the hell. But,
oh, God.
Anyway, thanks for the suggestion. This was a disturbing rabbit hole to fall down into, but now we're all going together.
Oh, here we go. Who's ready to make sure they've taken their meds before we go on this journey?
Yeah, this, not really any trigger warnings in this one.
No, it's more like general systemic doom and gloom than...
Yeah, we will have a little bit of a discussion of racism and racial bias, but nothing... nothing really graphic or anything like that. No. So,
and this was also inspired by the medical bias episodes.
Yes. Yeah, there'll be some tie-ins.
What led to this topic being suggested.
So I'm talking today about AI and algorithmic bias in medicine. So
doom. I'm telling you, we need that Law and Order. I want to describe it as like the pipe sound, but I don't think it's like actually a pipe, but anyway, I'm sorry.
No, I don't know that it is.
You know what I mean? It's like a tinny...
Right, like probably some sort of drum.
That sounds like a pipe. It's a pipe-shaped drum. It's a rain stick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Law and Order rain stick, famous.
Sorry. Go ahead. I'll see myself out.
We did not record a dysfunction junction before this episode, so...
Oh, yeah.
We're a little bit squiggly.
Yeah. That's like, you need, like when you shake out the wrinkles out of the laundry. Mm-hmm. That's what the dysfunction junction recordings do. We get all the weird out, and then we can record something real. We didn't do that beforehand, so...
Yeah.
Sorry.
Pure, unfiltered, concentrate without concentration. Anyway... So AI stands for artificial intelligence, It was actually first founded as an academic discipline in 1956.
Whoa.
I know, right?
Yeah, that's real old.
Real old. Before we got on the moon. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. The dictionary definition of AI is the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and translation between languages. According to Wikipedia, AI is intelligence, meaning perceiving, synthesizing, and inferring information, demonstrated by machines rather than demonstrated by animals and humans. AI is used to evaluate data. So, like Google will use AI in their predictive text based on what you start typing and what other people who have started that sentence ended up searching for, what type of sources or answers you engage in based on your previous web and search histories, and other factors. Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, they all use AI to recommend what you should watch next.
Yeah, it's that tweet that was like, oh, Gmail, if you know what I'm going to say, why don't you write the fucking email for me?
You know what? My Microsoft Word is starting to do that, and it's getting irritating.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, I know. Just the one that I have at home, not the one at work.
Yeah.
But yeah, my at-home license like updates every year.
Yeah. The one at work is like, I'm sorry, you want me to do what? Spell check?
You bought one license 300 years ago, and that's what you're stuck with.
You better like it. No, I can't format that for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You want to put a picture in? Chaos.
Or you get the notification, updates are ready for your computer. Okay, install. Log in as an administrator. Well,
Yeah, you need administrator approval to update.
which is like 4
anything.
levels of IT above whoever will ever speak to me when I call IT.
What gets me is the Adobe licenses. I can't update my Adobe because I'm not, I don't know, the president of Adobe. And it just, I can't open things then.
Yeah,
You want to sign that document? That's too bad.
my supervisor had to open a separate ticket to renew my Adobe license so that I could do my basic job function. Like edit PDFs.
Drives me crazy.
Anyway,
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
public sector work is just,
It's a dream.
it is all unicorns and stars.
It is every episode of Parks and Rec is what it is.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, the people who live in your phone, and the people who live in the box next to your computer, ALEXA, just in case anybody's listening to this on speakerphone. I don't want to set off your devices. Anyway, those use AI to understand what you're saying, though. And
Yeah. I hate that information. There's nobody more paranoid. I'm very Ron Swanson with this topic. Like, anything,
And it's the same thing on your phone when you use like talk to text or anything like that.
Yeah.
And as we discussed before we went on air, we've seen very recently AI creative and generative tools become popular with ChatGPT and AI art.
Right. Hate it.
Yeah. So anyway, do you want a tinfoil hat before we go further?
I would like that, actually.
Elevator music.
Ting, 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 ting.
That's your elevator?
I was thinking more tinfoil sounds.
Oh.
Neither is accurate, but that's fine.
So when we become accustomed to technology using AI to complete these tasks for us, like talk to text, we often remove these tasks from the definition of AI, which is, because we're so used to it, which is the phenomenon called AI effect.
I also hate that information.
Yeah. So anyway, what's an algorithm?
I don't know, but I'm going to hate it.
So the definition of an algorithm is a process or set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. So it's just a formula.
Right, but it's a formula that is self-improving as time goes on.
Well, that's...
When you combine it with the AI.
When used with AI.
Gotcha, okay.
So in this way, artificial intelligence uses algorithms to analyze data and then can allow us to extrapolate data to determine real-world implications of medical research and side effects experienced in a lab setting. and can also allow us to input some real-world data like socioeconomic status, insurance coverage, regional differences, etc., into that data.
Mm-hmm.
However, the reality is that AI is more artificial than intelligence, and it is best used when applied to, quote, narrow inference tasks, where large volumes of data are present and processing power is available to find those associations. So rather than using it as like a global implementation of something, then it's better on these like kind of micro
Targeted,
scales. Yes.
right.
Sort of like, did you ever see Minority Report?
Yeah.
Kind of like that. Like the criticism of that in that movie was that you're monitoring everybody, and the idea of like pre-crime
Right.
being used to prosecute people and convict them. It's like, well, that's not like you can't know that something wasn't going to interrupt the decision making into committing that crime.
Right. It's like that the NYPD guy with the girl meat.
What?
There was that. There's a documentary.
The Sarah Lawrence thing?
No, there's a documentary about a guy, and I think he was an NYPD officer, and he wound up getting arrested and charged, and they were calling it like a thought crime because he was like seeking out. He had like cannibalism ideation, I guess.
Okay.
And was like, I don't remember if that he was looking for people to eat or he was just talking to people about looking for people to eat. And like the attorney's argument was like, but he didn't eat anybody.
Right.
He was just looking for somebody to eat. Because he wound up like getting fired and getting arrested. And that was like the whole argument of the case was like, you can't arrest somebody for
like he only
considering like planning it but not doing it.
Right, like he only had mens rea. There was no action taken
Right.
on the mens rea, and you need both parts to be
right. And everybody else was like, yeah, but he's part of the NYPD and he's looking for girl meat. Like I think he had even purchased the stuff to capture someone. So there was definitely like
we should do that for Patreon.
Like, where's the line?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a documentary, and I don't remember. I'll have to find it. I'll see if my spouse remembers.
Yeah, that's interesting because.
And that's what I thought it was Minority Report because
right,
it was a conceptually similar in that he hadn't.
And it's similar to like
girls.
Conspiracy to commit a crime, like.
Right.
With those
Planning
elements.
a terrorist attack versus actually executing a terrorist
and there's like certain things like you have to take, there's like a point of no return.
Right.
In preparation for the crime where you can still be found. Like it's conspiracy to commit murder, not murder.
Right.
For example. But, I mean, I haven't looked at those laws since law school, so I don't need a refresher.
I'm not a kidnapping expert.
Anymore.
And then I also, with that, I'm like, yeah, but have you done it before and just not been caught?
It's kind of the Army Hammer thing.
Yes. Oh man, that was another rabbit hole that I was like, way.
You were super into
I
that.
was so into
you were
that.
so pumped.
I just like, it was so shocking. That would be another good Patreon rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because they just did like a big article on that recently.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody did. Vanity Fair, maybe?
Maybe. I remember seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that.
But anyway.
So tune into Patreon for
some girl meat. Sorry.
Don't.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please continue with your Minority Report comparison. And I take back what I said.
Okay. So when AI has been used it's better with these narrow inference tasks. Right.
Just like Google, like when you're Googling something.
Right, like it's like sometimes you'll type in something and you're like, that's not what I was looking for, like, and you go back to your search terms and adjust them.
Yes.
Meaning that we still need actual humans around to analyze the data, input and outputs.
Right.
And evaluate how that data can be implemented and how it's being used by the AI and whether or not it's actually being used properly by the AI. And it could be that the algorithm that we're using isn't appropriate for the type of output we're looking for.
Right.
So when
you are barking up the wrong tree.
Right, yeah, right track, wrong train.
Yep. Wrong gravy train. Yes.
You almost made yourself sick. I saw that. When AI has been used in the broader economy, concerns have emerged regarding its negative consequences in relation to bias. So, primarily, this bias is seen in racial bias in healthcare algorithms. Cut to the thread that ties us back to our medical bias episodes, episode 29 and 30. So, there's two types of racial bias in healthcare algorithms. Explicit use of race to predict outcomes and assess risk, which, for obvious reasons, there's been a recent move away from that methodology because it's a real obvious form of bias. But as we discussed in episode 30, just because they're not explicitly saying this patient is Black and therefore they won't go to their follow-up appointment doesn't mean that they aren't implicitly thinking that and adjusting the care for that patient based on that preconceived expectation.
Right, and offering them fewer options.
Right. Yeah, that's the human interface, not the AI interface. So,
unless you're teaching the AI,
we'll get there.
Or AI is learning from, I'm sorry, go ahead. Continue.
So, you also end up with this issue where if you're using data that inadvertently captures systemic racism, although unintentional, or at least not consciously intentional, that can result in additional inequities. So, why do we use these algorithms in healthcare? I'm going to say that better. Why do we use... Why do we use these algorithms in healthcare? So, healthcare providers use diagnostic algorithms that correct or predict their outputs to individualize risk assessment and guide clinical decisions. Which sounds like word soup, right?
Yep, sure does.
I read it like 3 times and I was like, please provide an example further down. So, for example, in obstetrics, right?
Yep.
Vaginal birth after cesarean or VBAC births, that's an algorithm that predicts the risk of labor and vaginal delivery of a subsequent pregnancy by somebody who has previously delivered a child via cesarean section. Massive disclaimer here, this is not medical recommendation from me or this podcast. Discuss with your own healthcare providers and remember that you are always entitled to a second opinion.
Also something we should probably put in every episode.
I mean, yeah. We're going to end up like Sawbones with like the disclaimer.
Get your mystery boil check.
I'm sorry, but don't take medical advice from an attorney and a Fox doctor. That's not what we're here for.
No clinical,
silly gooses.
Actual, real recommendations.
That's why we include the sources in our show notes.
Yes.
Like, do your own research. Ask your own doctors about it. Anyway.
Yes.
I also feel like, as a non-pregnant person who's never been pregnant, I feel like I always hear that the VBAC recommendations change like year to year or doctor to doctor. It like
yes.
Like everybody.
Women's healthcare, obstetrics, gynecology is the Wild West. There is no standard of care. Everybody has a subjective. That's like what we talked about in that medical bias episode where I was like, I'm going from one practice to another in the same city, in the same field, and had somebody look at me and go, that's not a standard of care I'm familiar with.
Right.
So, yes, it is true. It is way too subjective.
Right. So, I guess apparently, though, that's based on like an algorithm, this recommendation. So, whatever.
I mean, I don't know what's worse, an algorithm or an old wives' tale.
Right. Yeah. So,
it feels an algorithm and AI, like medical decisions, feels like the modern version of an old wives' tale.
Kind of, yeah. So I wrote down this recommendation I feel like changes year to year and doctor to doctor.
Yeah.
But the algorithm that they use also predicts a lower likelihood of success in a VBAC attempted birth for African Americans and Hispanics. From what I could see, there was no explanation.
No, I feel like it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So
Like, we don't invest, we're not spending as much money on them when they're coming in for their...
well, I have a
visits.
little bit of an explanation, and you're going to get really mad.
Oh, okay, good.
So, vaginal deliveries are generally withheld from non-white women more often, or non-white pregnant people more often, because, which we know because non-white women continue to have higher rates of C-sections than white women. And from what I could tell, there's no biological explanation for why a Black pregnant person
Right.
is prone to a breech delivery, or, you know,
right.
like prone to needing
No.
a C-section.
Right, like everybody is pretty much built the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So, right, like...
the plumbing is the same, so there's no reason for, yeah.
Right, and so then, with a second pregnancy, you have more patients with their second pregnancy
automatically getting a cesarean because they'll deny them a vaginal birth.
Right, because they've already had a cesarean. So more often than not, in a second pregnancy, a white woman will have already delivered vaginally versus her Black or Hispanic counterparts,
right,
who have more often than not had a cesarean. More often than their white counterparts have had cesareans.
At a higher rate have been delivering via cesarean.
Right. So then it skews the data so that for the VBAC algorithm, it's going to say, well, you have to. And
because it's safer. That's my understanding is VBAC is not safe. So once you have a C-section, you have to have another C-section pretty much.
That was my understanding as well. And I think, but then again, it goes back and forth. Yeah. So it like, I don't know, it's this whole thing.
And that's how everything, as a pregnant person, everything I research is, everything seems subjective all the time. I feel
like that's why you have to find providers that you personally click with.
Yeah.
So that you can just say, like, I'm just going to do what you tell me to do. Like, I have to trust you.
That's my birth plan. I want to go into the hospital, have a child, and I want both of us to leave alive and in one piece.
At the same time, ideally.
At the same time. Yeah. That's pretty much it. That's my whole, to not leave with a significant amount of physical and mental trauma. That's the goal. That's it.
That's bold. Plan. Bold ass.
Oh. That is so progressive. There's no.
How
plan.
could you say something so brave yet so true?
It's almost like you didn't plan this at all. Nope. Nope. There's no goal aside from being alive and not scarred emotionally.
I was going to say, you might end up with actual scars.
I also really preferably would like to leave with a B-hole. That's also on the list.
Separate from your V-hole.
Separate. I want 2 separate holes.
Minimum.
Minimum. Can you add orifices for me, please?
I want to keep them guessing, you know? I got to get it spicy. been together for 10 years.
That's so horrific. So horrific. Oh my God. She's so happy with herself.
Yeah. Can't wait. In like 5 years, when we're still doing this podcast somehow, and I'm having a kid, you'll be able to horrify me. So,
tell you all about the pooping and the
ice holes. Diapers.
Yeah. All the extra holes, like an iPhone.
Yeah.
Well, iPhone has lost holes over time.
That's true. Yeah, they've closed up.
Like an old iPhone.
Like an old ear piercing.
Just gets worse.
We're cursed.
We are. Sorry.
So anyway, like I said, the algorithm for VBAC deliveries ends up using skewed data because the starting point is the result of implicit bias, and that could also be the result of these systemic issues in healthcare where people from lower socioeconomic statuses are going to these hospitals that are completely overcrowded. Their doctors are overworked, and for better or worse, the doctor is just trying to get the baby out alive before a shift change,
as
and you have
quickly
to,
as possible.
right, like you have to update new staff on what's going on.
Right.
And it can just, you can look at this thing and say, we don't have the resources to allow you to labor naturally for 39 hours before you deliver.
Right.
So we have to, you know, they're looking at it from an economic perspective. The hospital's looking at it from, well, if we turn this over and get this room cleaned.
In a more predictable fashion.
Right.
You know, if we can have her definitely in and out in 36 hours versus maybe 48 or 72, if we're letting her labor naturally and then, you know, have a day to recover. You know, all the extra time they give you in the hospital after you've had this major medical event. The whopping 6 hours you spend in a hospital after before they send you home, and then you don't see anybody for 6 weeks.
Right.
I'm sorry.
And,
anyway.
Well, you're right, though. And there's plenty of studies about the benefit of a baby of having a vaginal delivery.
Right.
And, like, the vaginal, the birth canal, like, flora that the baby can get. And
right.
They need less suctioning a lot of times because it gets all, like, squeezed out of them like a packet of ketchup, I guess. I don't know.
Like toothpaste.
Yeah. And that's less graphic than my version.
Yep. Less farting, also. Also less red.
So that was an example of
yes,
healthcare algorithmic bias.
Right, because it definitely is like a chicken and egg situation.
Exactly.
Am I having this VBAC, or am I being denied a VBAC because it's really not safer for me, or because the computer told my provider, who is racist, that it's unsafe for me to do it?
Well, even if your provider's not racist, if
not conscious,
if it's actually not safe, fine. But if you were denied the opportunity for a vaginal birth in the first place,
yep,
then it's like you just lose that element of control over your, you lose that autonomy.
You're eliminated a major medical decision.
Not to mention, I've watched an animation of what a C-section is. Do you know how many layers there are to your stomach? There's a lot.
It's nuts.
And
plus you're cutting through like muscle and you're taking organs out.
The
and
most horrifying part of it was that they like make this incision, and God forbid they just make it a little bit wider. No, they make their little 10-centimeter incision, which, by the way, folks, is less than 5 inches. So it's like the size of a conservative bagel, really.
It's Cheerio size, right?
And then they use these like metal scoopies to rip it apart and like stretch. And I just think like, just if you need more space, take more space.
Right.
Like just, what?
Why are you ripping at me?
Right. Like,
it's kind of like, I read about one woman who had an episiotomy. There was no consent. They just went in and like, what?
And I've heard recently that you actually heal better if they don't cut.
Yes.
And then stitch you up afterwards if you need stitches.
Right. And they cut you like any which way with an episiotomy. What? I can't, there's just.
Yeah. No, it's
I'll save my screams for another point in the day where I'm just mad about everything.
Oh, our little mini-sode that we're recording later will get you screeching.
Oh, good.
Let me tell you, I was hyped. Garet's maternity leave is going to be lit, guys. It's going to be.
Wait. There's going to be so much screaming. Garet's going to be screaming. The baby's going to be screaming. Katie's going to be screaming.
Donkey!
Oh my God.
Okay, so a 2019 study of healthcare algorithms found that Black patients who are considerably sicker than their white counterparts are given the same risk score. And that risk score is used to determine whether the patient should be admitted or if they're told to follow up with their PCP, and also then what their course of care looks like.
Right, like what treatment options are they even being offered?
Right.
Because the computer is telling them to offer.
This algorithm in particular evaluated, or the algorithm that was evaluated in that study assigned risk scores based on past healthcare spending.
Yes.
So
I did read about that and was, again, chicken and egg.
Right. And based on that, it found that Black patients in general have lower healthcare spending than white patients for a given level of health. So I'm going to refer you again back to episode 30 and our discussion on racial medical bias. The study that I'm talking about today blamed this disparity in healthcare spending on existing racial disparities in the system. So again, if you're in an area that doesn't have as many options for your healthcare providers, if you don't have comprehensive health insurance, if you're in the US,
There's a lot of people.
right, if your health insurance is cost prohibitive, even if you have it, if you have a stupid high deductible, then it's automatically going to temper your spending.
Right.
So regardless of your race, like I know people who are white who have extremely high deductible plans and they just forego treatment that they would probably really benefit from.
It's working exactly the way they wanted it to.
Exactly. So, yeah, episode 30 for that discussion and more in depth, and also the episode notes for episode 29 have all the sources for episode 30 that include that racial bias in healthcare stuff. So, this study from 2019 also noted that the risk level that would result in the automatic identification for the care management team showed Black patients had 26.3% more chronic illnesses than white patients. Yet, if the bias was eliminated from the algorithm, if the healthcare spending part was eliminated from the algorithm, the percentage of Black patients that automatically would have been enrolled in the care management program would rise from 17.7% to 46.5%. More than double.
30% difference.
Mm-hmm. It was huge. I was like, that is like not negligible, even a little bit.
No.
So yeah, no, it was wild. And the algorithmic bias was also found to account for 4.7 times more racial disparities in pain relative to standard measures of severity graded by doctors. Meaning, having a human interface of a healthcare provider who has been adequately trained out of their racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, sexual orientation, or religious biases
that they're getting while they're in medical school if
Right.
they don't have it going in.
But that's a critical part of using these algorithms
Right.
effectively. So, and also these algorithms are used all the time to help predict healthcare costs so that these hospitals can estimate what they need to be bringing in, what they are spending, what they will spend the next year, all that stuff.
And there's been like a huge, like my spouse has a Six Sigma certification, which is like operational efficiency. And there's been a huge influx of people with that Six Sigma going into healthcare, and hospitals hiring them and insurance companies hiring them so they can cut costs. Like, hey, you guys are already cutting corners on everybody's treatment all the time. Do we really need you to like tell everybody how to be more efficient,
Well, and
more lean?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, don't get me wrong. I think that there are many processes in administration
For sure.
that can be more efficient.
Just like with anything else.
Right, exactly. But when you're the
some things are not about efficiency. Like education,
you're doing a capitalism
efficiency.
about it, and
Yes.
like you can't, like, the problem that we're having in America, because we are a shithole country,
We are the shithole country.
is that our healthcare is a capitalist system. It's not
Yes.
socialized healthcare. We don't have single payer healthcare.
And they're doing the same thing with education. Education is turning into a capitalist structure.
Yes. So, yeah, and it's the like, well, basically, if you want better healthcare, why don't you stop being so poor? It's like Mr. Fischoeder from Bob's Burgers, but
Yes.
not at all charming or cute, and not Kevin Kline.
And not ironic.
Yes.
Just reality.
Yes.
It is Mr. Fischoeder. You're right. That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Eye patch and everything.
Yeah.
White suit.
Can you tell I've been doing a rewatch of Bob's Burgers because it's every reference I have?
She also left her keyboard downstairs when she got here.
I did, yeah. But don't worry, we still have Garet for the fart noises.
Yep.
Anyway.
We'll pretend they're fake.
That was a real one. So yeah, like we said in episode 30, like it's not just as simple as, oh, okay, well, Black and Hispanic patients or Black patients only refuse procedures that are offered to them, as we previously discussed, because of these systemic racial biases. The Black patients aren't even offered treatments that could be more effective. They're not offered mastectomies at the same rate as white patients with breast cancer. They're not offered cardiac treatments for
nuts.
Yeah, for types of I think it was like an arrhythmia thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not offered those treatments, so their healthcare costs will be different. So you're not even comparing the same. You're not comparing the groups properly.
Right.
You aren't. You kind of have to like parse out the differences
Mm-hmm.
and not include those at all. And like you have to take, okay, this patient with this exact medical history and this patient, patient B with the same exact medical history and the same course of treatment, like only use those things. And then again, you end up with like, well, then how can we use it to predict costs and like outcomes and this, that, and the other? Because no patient is really identical. Like you said, again, with your infertility thing, like everybody's different.
Right.
So that's why you need that human interface. And
that's why you need a not super racist human interface.
Yeah. So also regarding bias between the sexes. So there's a couple. This one was interesting because my research showed that there were desirable biases when it came to the differences between the sex in implementing algorithms.
I disagree.
So hear me out. A desirable bias includes taking into account sex and gender differences to make precise diagnoses and recommend tailored and more effective treatment for each individual. This represents a much more accurate approach than collapsing all sex and gender categories into one, and such as data generated from mixed sex or mixed gender cohorts. So, like we discussed, how medicine and pharmaceuticals don't account for how those drugs will interact with female hormones.
Right.
Like, separating those groups is actually necessary to accurately predict the outcomes.
Right, but do they?
Well, so it's that thing of like almost like an overcorrection.
Yeah.
Of like, well, we can't mix.
We can't make it good, so we're just gonna make it
God
worse.
forbid, we can't mix the races.
Oh my God.
But we can mix the sexes just fine. So it's kind of like there's also the undesirable bias that comes up as unintended or unnecessary sex and gender discrimination and occurs when claims are made in relation to sex or gender in medical conditions despite the lack of exhaustive evidence to support them or based on skewed evidence. For example, epidemiological studies indicate there is a higher prevalence of depression among women. However, this may result from a skewed diagnosis due to clinical scales of depression measuring symptoms that occur more frequently among women. So, another source of undesirable bias is the misrepresentation of the target population, leaving minorities out. Another example is, of course, excluding pregnant and nursing people from psychiatric research.
And everything.
Well, yes.
Nothing.
You can't even ride a roller coaster anymore. What is the world coming to?
Can I take this medication? No. We don't actually know. We're just telling you no because nobody will test it.
Right. So,
roller coaster.
Which I didn't realize on the depression scale, like how they measure that and whether... I didn't realize that, I guess, depression shows up differently for men.
Oh, like the representation is different?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that either. But also I feel like if you're asking me like in the last 4 weeks, have you had feelings of this? If my period was a week ago, yeah, I could have felt hopeless or more tired than usual, or so yeah, I feel like
I cried listening to like a listener story for Sinisterhood this morning.
Yeah.
It was so random. I was like, oh boy. Ovulating, huh?
What is the date? I just think that.
Oh my god, his mom loved him. So stupid. Touching story, but I was like, it is 8 a.m., lady. Like,
what am I doing?
Yeah, exactly.
What is happening?
No, but you're right. And so it was just one of those things where I was like, huh. Although we haven't actually done an episode on depression yet.
Literally just gonna say to you, maybe we should do an episode on depression, because now I'm interested, like, what the differences are.
Oh, now you're interested? That's nice, Garet. Yeah. Jeez.
Not that, let me put it this way. I'm interested to see the information. Am I going to have more sympathy for men? Never. Let's give that disclaimer right now. No offense, man. Just kidding. Offense. All the offense.
All right. Well, as Garet taught us in her hormone episodes.
And is teaching you right now in her hormone episode.
What pregnancy hormones?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So there's extremely relevant differences between the sexes and how we're treated in the pharmacodynamics world. So pharmacodynamics, if you don't know, is a single word, which is ridiculous because there's like a trillion letters.
Too many letters.
But it's the study of how different chemicals interact with one another in the human body. So it measures, or it studies how different drugs interact with each other, but also how those drugs interact with your own biological makeup. And that's how we get to that point where they're like, we can't possibly throw estrogen into this test, like, God forbid. So I wrote, i.e. how hormones and other meds you're on mix together to make a cursed or #blessed cocktail in your system.
Usually cursed.
Yeah.
And then when you ask about side effects, they're like, yeah, duh.
Yeah.
Didn't you do all of your own research on this medication?
We gave you the 45-page insert that is written in 0.3
Didn't
font.
you read the fine print?
Yeah, on newsprint that's translucent, so don't read it in a
you hit
sunny
the agree
place.
on.
Yeah.
You hit the agree on terms and
You
conditions.
said you didn't have any questions for the pharmacist.
So what do you want me to do?
What?
I can't answer questions.
You can't have questions now, dummy.
Yes. Yes, that's how I feel most of the time.
So, pharmacodynamics, as I said, it furthers proving that the design of preclinical and clinical studies really needs to have sex and gender-based striations in them to reduce the time it takes to translate adverse effects reported by patients after FDA approval.
Right. Also, yeah, on the FDA too. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
Well, and it's women way more often will report adverse side effects after FDA approval and something hits the market, because women are not usually included in the clinical trials, let alone preclinical trials. And something I read also said that in lab settings, they're still using mostly male mice. They don't even, like, split that up, which I feel like is the most basic. Yeah, it's so fucking random. Like, just, it's mice.
And I bet you there's so many men that are like, oh, that's female privilege. They don't test on you.
Well, yeah, but those guys also have to jerk off because no women will date them, but it's all because what is the word they use? I don't know. Their slang is so bizarre, the incels.
What?
I wonder how many incels listen to our podcast. Probably
None.
We're probably big in the incel world.
We're too triggering for incels for them to listen.
Good.
Yeah. Again.
As I look at my spit dribbled all over myself from earlier.
Yeah, we're both doing really well. Thanks for asking.
So it is for this reason, fair data generation and explainable algorithms are fundamental to the design and application of AI in healthcare settings to optimize health and well-being across the sex and gender spectrum. This is also important. Here's a real-world example. Heart attacks. Men experience, when having a heart attack, nausea or vomiting, jaw, neck, or back pain, squeezing chest pressure or pain, and shortness of breath. Women, when they're having a heart attack, can experience nausea or vomiting, jaw, neck, or upper back pain specifically, chest pain sometimes, but not always, pain or pressure in their lower chest or upper abdomen, shortness of breath, fainting, indigestion, and extreme fatigue. Which are so, like, and there was that thing where they were like, oh, it feels like a period cramp. Where it's like, well, thank you for putting it in terms that I can understand.
As far as, like, intensity goes, but also, those
Location.
are really vague symptoms. Not vague, but, like,
Well, I mean,
like
upper abdomen pain, like, I'm going to think that I just ate too much, or indigestion.
I would think that was my ulcer acting up.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I've had a heart attack and I don't know.
Maybe.
I'm not going to say that out loud. I'm sorry. Keep going.
You have a blood pressure cuff downstairs.
You'll be fine. Just check it.
So yeah, so it's, those differences are, that like the difference in heart attacks is something that I know of because of that Go Red for Women campaign that they do every February. But there's, I'm sure, plenty of other conditions that manifest differently between the sexes. And part of that is also, societal and based on how men and women are, quote unquote, allowed to express discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And so like upper back pain, I always have upper back pain. I have huge boobs. Like,
yeah, like, I mean, I was just thinking if I had nausea, vomiting, and like upper abdominal pain, I would think I had
Pepto-Bismol.
Yeah, I would think I had like a stomach bug.
Yeah.
Especially if it was just like a rapid onset. I would never and fatigue. Yeah, I'm sick.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's wrong with me. I have a stomach bug.
And I'm surprised because I know that left arm pain is also, or left arm numbness is a symptom of a heart attack. But it wasn't listed on the...
Yeah, like I thought upper arm pain was like, but I thought that was more men than women. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like, am I relaying actual information or old wives' tales? Don't know.
No one knows.
Or is AI telling me what to think?
We're not doctors, so it doesn't matter.
That's true. Good point. Kind of like our bear attack tips.
Yeah, which PK appreciated. Now he knows how to survive a bear attack. But
I laughed so hard at that.
Don't give him your kid. He's going to feed it to a bear.
That's true. He'd be like, hello, Mr. Bear. I'm a human. This is a smaller, tastier human. I need to go.
This one's like veal.
Right? Am I right?
Fresh.
Runs away. Doesn't run. Slowly walks away.
Right.
So he doesn't get chased.
With arms waving.
Introducing yourself is just
that much. Yeah. So anyway, so because the AI computers can only use the information provided to it, the concern is not only that the AI is just reflecting our biases back to us, but that AI is doing so on a massive scale without oversight, creating a situation called algorithmic bias. Mm-hmm. So I read an article in the Journal of Global Health called Artificial Intelligence and Algorithmic Bias, Implications for Health Systems. And that article highlighted 3 challenges that health systems will face in addressing algorithmic bias. First, lack of a clear standard of fairness. So algorithms are trained on data from the world as it currently exists. Mm-hmm. So for this article gave an example of basically doing a Google search. They didn't use Google. But if you do a Google search for images of CEO, that showed 11% of results were female. However, at the time the search was used, 20% of CEOs in the US were women. So that raises the question of whether the algorithm is biased or was it just reflecting the available data?
I hate it.
Yeah. So that showed that the algorithms needed additional stewardship, but because there's not a universally recognized quantitative summary metric for fairness, quote unquote, the evaluation is ultimately qualitative and therefore at the mercy of the implicit biases of the evaluators. So just as a reminder, implicit bias is a form of bias that occurs automatically and unintentionally, but nevertheless affects judgment, decisions, and behavior. So the second type of challenge affecting algorithmic bias is the lack of contextual specificity. So health systems and needs vary in design, objectives, and critically, in the diversity of the groups they serve, from different cultures and environments with different socioeconomic profiles, lifestyles, preferences, and genetic endowments. Thus, a, quote, generally applicable AI model should be developed based on data that reflects the diversity of the place where it will be used.
Right.
But data from those groups is not necessarily available.
Oh my God.
Based on the aforementioned racial bias and systemic racism.
Yes.
So, certain groups are not sampled at all or are only sampled in a specific context, leading to skewed data. For example, oftentimes politicians will point to the high crime areas in inner cities as proof that police are needed, but don't acknowledge that those areas are predominantly inhabited by Black and brown bodies and are subject to increased patrols by police that suburban and rural areas simply don't have. Like, I grew up in the suburbs, and the only time I saw a police car on my street was when somebody's son was visiting them, and the son was a cop.
Oh, I was like, yeah, because men are causing problems.
No.
Okay.
No.
I see what you're saying. Yep. That too.
The police officer was visiting his mom.
Yep.
We did not have neighborhood patrols, though. Like, the cops weren't just, like, doing rounds.
Yeah. My area was poorer, so yes.
Right. So if you have constant surveillance, though,
right, like, by nature of them snooping around and bending rules, they're going to find
well, they're going to
fuckery.
see, like, yeah, they're going to see more instances of truancy or graffiti or
and
vandalism.
also, like, it's again a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, then you'll see somebody who's getting pulled over because the police officer thinks that they're just a fuck.
Right.
There's a
Cut to
phrase I'm looking for that's not coming to me, and then they wind up with a resisting arrest charge, and that's their charge. You're like,
Right.
So why did you stop them, and why were you having an interaction in the first place?
Right.
So anyway.
But compared to the fucking Murdoch family.
Don't even get me. Woo! Don't even get me started.
So, like,
Somebody take New Buster down.
They were obviously not behaving ever,
Right.
but they were never subjected to increased surveillance.
Correct.
So, it's just that thing of
Bullshit.
yes,
It's talking points and bullshit.
yes,
And scared white people that like punitive measures for other people because it makes them feel better.
right. So that's why the lack of contextual specificity, like to say, oh, the crime rate in upstate New York is so much higher than it used to be. Well, the population is higher, number one. Number two, you're packing more people into the major cities in upstate New York. So because those areas have more police patrols, you're going to have an uptick in crime.
Right. Or there's fewer jobs available because the economy's bad, which means
right. So then
desperate times, desperate measures.
So you need that context
right
to either adjust the algorithm itself
right.
or have that human interface after the fact to say, like, to kick out the more extraneous
skewing data.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, like, none of these large scale issues, like we were talking about how it needs to be, you need to have, like, you need to ask Google a pointed question in order to get the information you're looking for. You can't give simplistic solutions to large scale complex problems.
Right.
So no, it's just not like an increase in crime. Like, there's 1,000 reasons why there's an increase in crime. And is there really an increase in crime, or is there like a tiny increase in crime?
Is it even an increase? Is it
Right.
just like we know crime goes up in the summer?
Right.
Like,
how are you skewing the data to make it work for your narrative?
Right.
Just like, how is the data getting skewed with AI because you're giving it bad input?
Right. So the third way that the third challenge facing health systems trying to address algorithmic bias is, quote, they called it the black box nature of deep learning.
I hate that. I hate that whole thing.
Deep learning involves the transformation of data from the real world, such as pixels from an X-ray, into multiple layers of numbers that are combined to create the output of a diagnostic category. So in this example, like the computer is reading the X-ray to tell you if there's a fracture rather than like a radiologist telling you, which is wild. Why do you look so afraid?
Oh, I hate it. Like, there's just some things I'm like, can't we? I feel it makes me feel like such a boomer that I'm like, I want to talk to a person, but like, seriously, can I just have like a human with eyeballs looking at my X-ray instead of the Jetsons?
Mm-hmm. I mean, unless that computer is also just going to be like boop, 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 and then heal the bone instantly.
Correct.
Irrelevant input, frankly, from the computer.
Yes.
Like, shut the fuck up and take the picture.
Nobody
my guy.
asked you.
Yeah.
Take the picture and give it to a human with eyeballs.
Really ableist, but whatever.
Sorry. Sorry, everybody. Just real mad about this topic.
So in practice, there are up to 100 layers of numbers, and the relative influence of different elements in each layer is established within the process of learning. At this point in time, we don't know how to measure the learning curve of an AI system, and therefore, data scientists, clinicians, and patients can't know exactly how the algorithm produced a particular outcome or prediction. Yeah.
I mean, there's times where, like, I think it's a good thing. Like, so they're starting to use AI with, like, farming, where they can, like, the AI, the machines are planting the crops. They have, like, a geotag assigned to each plant, so they know, like, that plant's history and know exactly how to treat an issue exactly as it comes up. And that's a type of efficiency that I think is great. Looking at my X-ray and having it, like, beep boop and tell me if my arm is broken, not a fan of.
Mm.
And then being like, well, we don't actually know at this point if it's just that the machine's really smart or I'm sorry, keep going.
No, I mean, I agree. I think
I'm
there's
just going to circle the drain with this.
There's the thing of like, at what point are we taking out the human element of humanity and
right.
the human experience?
Like some things shouldn't be computer driven.
Right.
Healthcare, just like it shouldn't be driven by capitalism, should not be computer driven. Like some things just need humans. Like, do I think that it should play a role? Like maybe there's a diagnosis that they wouldn't have otherwise considered. Sure, but is it ever really working to somebody's benefit like that? Probably not.
Yeah.
It's probably more focused on cutting costs than anything
else.
I
think we see this a lot in like probably medical coding.
Right.
And how they will like, so okay, you go in to the ER and you're explaining to the triage nurse like what your problem is. Mm-hmm. They'll put in the code. You're explaining it to like a normal person, like, oh, I fell and now I can't like move my wrist really. I can't make a fist.
Right.
So I need help.
Help me.
So they'll put in a code that's like, slip and fall, wrist pain, left arm, blah, blah, blah. They put in that code, but they're interpreting what you're saying. There's that human interface before that data goes into the computer.
Who then may be looking at a diagnosis and being like, oh, something. Nope, that's not accurate.
Right.
That definitely can't be it.
So, and then, when you have patients that come in who might have like needs from the psych department and they might have like a physical injury. Oh, I slipped and fell and da-da-da. It's like, oh.
Also, why is that guy climbing the wall?
Right. Well, it's like, well, that doesn't exactly explain the type of injury you have. Like you slipped and fell and, landed on your hand, but why do you have a head laceration? And, that's where clinicians and the human part comes in with having a human nurse or doctor there to ask those questions and piece together the information that the computer can't see or the computer isn't being told.
Telling you in a very subtle way that they're not safe at home. Like all I can picture is going to the ER and having it be like when you're ordering something at McDonald's with one of those machines. And it's like, do you want a large or a small? And you're like, I'm not safe at home. And it's like, do you want a large or a small?
Press 0 or say operator.
Yes. And then you say operator and it's like, Do you want a large or a small?
Yes. Just the possum screaming into the phone meme.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, possible remedies for algorithmic bias.
Going off grid. Delete Ron Swanson.
Yeah, throw your typewriter in the dumpster.
Yes.
Establish the context in which algorithms will be developed and deployed. So if bias is present in the world, it's going to show up in the data and will be learned by the machine you give the data to. Hiding or protecting certain variables from the algorithm will not eliminate algorithmic bias because the data will still reflect the bias of the researchers.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, in the context of health systems, the programmers need to, quote, be explicitly aware of the specificities of the health system context for which they are developing the algorithms by considering differential needs of different groups, which is best achieved by multidisciplinary data science teams and by regulating and evaluating the algorithms periodically. So, like,
right.
don't just, like, set it and forget it. Yeah.
Right.
So, 2, establish a process to counter the risks of bias in algorithm development. One suggestion is that these systems use a, quote, human in the loop system, where a human decision maker reviews the algorithmic outputs to allow the human to make that final decision. And I wrote, here's hoping that the human they choose has been trained to evaluate biases in healthcare.
Right. I mean,
I would hope. But
yeah.
the fact that the article didn't say it, I was like, uh-oh.
Oh, so we're just all silently acknowledging that.
Yeah, I'm like, I feel like we need to be more explicit.
Yes.
But anyway, if we can train developers and data scientists to both recognize and consider bias, that will help reduce bias in algorithm development. And the peer review process can be helpful, but that requires that the algorithm get published in a peer-reviewed journal. And
everything becomes proprietary in a capitalist society, so...
Well, not even that, but the speed of development. Like, we're developing them too fast to publish them and allow them time to be peer-reviewed.
Let alone, like, any kind of governmental regulation, because that's a good 30 years behind the technology.
Well, don't worry, because I come back to that.
Oh,
so,
okay, cool.
The third way to counteract algorithmic bias is balanced development of the discipline of health data science. Developing an AI algorithm in the health sciences requires engineers, statisticians, and healthcare providers, which is like so much brain power I can't even fathom. Like,
yeah.
I would feel like I had the IQ of a Q-tip in that room.
Yeah.
Like,
and also all I can think is like, and this is just me being really cynical, is
cool.
You get a bunch of like dudes in that room because you know they would just end up being a bunch of dudes who then just are having a pissing match over who's smarter. That's how I see that going. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's me being cynical.
It's definitely you being cynical. I think that there are far more women in STEM these days, particularly as a healthcare provider and
Love
engineer.
It.
I don't know necessarily about statisticians, but you definitely see them more. I definitely see them more in engineering and healthcare roles.
Yeah, that's true. And like, I mean, I also wonder sometimes if I'm projecting because I refuse to see men. So, male provider, no, thank you.
The only male provider I have is my GP, who I'm like fascinated by. He's one of the best people I've ever met.
Yeah.
But I've seen a male gynecologist before for one of my colpos. That's the only time a man I wasn't dating was between my legs.
Fair.
So.
No, I've had a couple male gynecologists because I used to try and tell myself, like, there's no difference. Don't be judgmental.
I've heard
there's a difference.
People in our parents' age bracket basically say things like they would avoid female physicians because they believed that they had less training, which could have been true because they were edged out of training opportunities.
Like boxed out of any...
Right. So then it was like, again, that self-perpetuating bullshit because it's like, well, I can't get the training if you don't allow me to get the training.
Right.
And then, so all I'm doing is like practicing sutures on grapefruit or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, that's some madness. But anyway, Yeah, no, I've heard that more than once, and I just think I refuse to believe it. Like
We're definitely past that now
I think so.
because you've got more women going into like law and medicine than men.
Ha ha! Yes, suck it.
Um,
Eat my farts.
but
That's what Bart Simpson says, right?
yeah, I think so. Shorts?
Oh, that's what it is.
I do have
Tomato.
I do have a little rabbit hole that I fell down. Actually,
Cool.
we could probably do like a brief Patreon on it, but it talks about men and it'll make you more cynical about
Perfect.
them. Yeah, just what we need, right? Fuel on this fire.
Our Patreons will love it.
Yeah. Our Patronuses will be big fans.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so it requires engineers, statisticians, and healthcare providers. These professions all have known problems with gender and racial diversity, at least in the US, but definitely also in other countries as well. The study I was reading suggests developing a data scientist oath that enshrines a specific commitment to addressing algorithmic bias.
Yeah, that's excellent. I like that.
Yeah, and very specific to that career, I guess.
Yeah, and like something that is going to be a growing problem in the future.
Mm-hmm. And so then...
Oh, sorry. That came out of nowhere.
So then creating teams that develop these AI programs who are diverse and from diverse backgrounds will help with this. But in my opinion, as demonstrated by the research I did in the medical bias episodes, even minorities can be taught to be biased.
Yeah.
So it really, like, not to be all Reaganomics about it, but like you have to start at the top and fix that situation so that those people aren't training the new people with their own biases.
Right, because that's definitely happening.
Yeah.
And I think what was really mind-blowing to me, like when we were reading some of these articles that our friend of the pod sent, was, you know, you think about the conversations that have been happening in the last few years about like dealing with things on a systemic level. How do you deal with it on a systemic level when you constantly have AI feeding it? So like even if you think you're fixing it,
yeah,
AI is like doing all this background work to just fuck it up more.
And
So
it's right, and that's
crazy.
like the Minority Report thing. Like
Yeah.
you have to almost like you have to just completely power down that system.
Yeah, reboot.
Right. Like set up your stats differently and then turn it on. Like you because it's currently just reflecting our biases and our problems back to us. And
I feel like the United States could use a hard reset at this point.
well,
We do
depending on
need to-
which politician you talk to,
We do need to turn it off and turn it back on again.
that would be nice.
Yeah.
Or just hit us on the side really hard with like
Yeah.
a flat hand or a baseball bat.
And then reboot us.
Yeah.
Or turn us off, give us 3 minutes to cool down, and then turn us back on.
Take out our cartridge and blow on us really hard.
Yeah, just, you know, one of those blowjobs
Mhm.
to fix it.
Just a reset blowjob.
Yep.
Everybody knows that those work. Our parents are going to love this episode. Anyway, the fourth way to
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought there was 3.
No, I have
Sorry.
2 more.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
So the fourth the fourth way is transparency and explainability in algorithm development. So this is about making the inner workings of the deep learning aspects, the black box part
Yeah.
of the algorithm, particularly the AI's parameters, inputs, and outputs, and counterfactuals available so that clinicians and policymakers know which information is even being used
Right, which we're way too capitalist for that.
so that they can make a decision as to whether the AI directed outcome is reasonable or not based on the factors considered by the algorithm and the purpose for the output.
Right.
And then finally, public sector involvement. And I think that this is ultimately what would actually solve the problem and also what will never be done.
Right, because, I mean, how many different things, like, you have to force regulation in order for anything to be safe for people.
Yeah. So this study said that the public sector must be involved in development and implementation of AI in the healthcare space because the public sector is better able to establish standards of fairness and they can provide the largest data sets possible, which would provide AI with the diversity necessary to overcome the implicit biases. However, Private sector companies need to be willing to share their AI technology with the public sector in order to create that symbiotic relationship, so I'm doubtful.
Yeah, LOL. Like, never in a million.
The end. That's all I have.
The end.
Goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, like, you just look at the number of things that companies are like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, free market.
Adam Smith can suck every last D.
Who's Adam Smith?
That's the one who developed that invisible hand of the market theory.
Oh, you know what? I confused him with Adam Schiff, and I was like, don't we like that one?
No. Fun fact about Adam Schiff, his wife is named Eve.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I hope they only wore
Cute,
fig
right?
leaves to their wedding.
Well, I didn't Google that in my random Googling.
It was a missed opportunity if they didn't.
That's true.
Or just at least their wedding cake toppers were just nude Adam and Eve.
Or if they had a snake officiate the
Yeah,
wedding.
well, or a snake would be like wrapping around the tiers of the wedding cake, and they're sitting on top of an apple, naked, with a fig leaf.
So
on
what
their
you're saying
hip
is
knops.
you're just hoping there was a lot of nudity at the wedding. She's like, no.
Make your guests as
Maybe.
uncomfortable as possible. Everybody knows that's the best way to have a good wedding.
Lots of nudity and lots of eye contact. Well, that was excellent and disheartening and upsetting.
Yes.
So good job.
Yeah, it was.
Even though I was constantly derailing it.
You did your best.
I did.
And that's what matters, in the words of the Grinch. We did our worst, and that's what matters.
Me every time you're doing the research on an episode.
It's true.
I'm just the WB frog.
Although I was
the
fully
top hat.
crazy for PCOS, so we're even. Yeah. You didn't sing.
That's a good point. That is a good point. I didn't even bust out that song from Monsters, Inc. Put
No,
that
you
thing
didn't.
back where it came from.
Well, now you did.
I didn't sing it. We won't count it.
You had a wobbly chair.
I did have a wobbly chair, although it seems to have stopped.
Yeah, it's better
I
now.
probably jinxed it. Well,
Probably.
good job. And thanks for the recommendation, Shrimply.
Yeah, you're the best. Thanks for really just allowing us to get swallowed into the what's it called? The place in Get Out.
Oh, the
Sunken place?
yes.
I
I was like the upside down.
Yeah,
No,
that's what I was
Stranger
gonna
Things.
say, and I was like, no, that's not the
They
right.
both work.
Get us, velcroed into the sunken place with your topic suggestions, because the other topic suggestion you have, I haven't even started to delve in yet, but I know about it, and it is dark.
Yeah, Shrimply can give us the darkest recommendations.
Yeah, it's almost
Of
like,
content.
like if Morticia Addams wasn't, counterbalanced by Gomez.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll do it for us this week. And we'll see you next Thursday with
Something else.
something
Oh yeah, we know what the
sensory
something else is.
processing disorder. We both had a brain fart on that one.
Oh
Jesus.
boy, sorry about that.
So yeah, next week we'll be talking about sensory processing disorder,
Mhm.
and that'll be shorter than this one. So
So we will see you next week.
yeah, and in the meantime, fight algorithmic bias and racial bias, and fight the man.
Go off grid.
Yeah.
Wear your tinfoil hat.
But bring us with you. Charge your phone. So you
Oh
can
yeah,
still
that
listen.
too. Yeah, charge your phone.
Don't go so off the grid.
Yeah. When I say off grid, I just take a break. Because the bar is ankle high.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be here next Thursday with another episode to tingle your ear holes. In the meantime, the best way to support us is to follow us on Instagram at The Bar is Ankle High, and to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on your preferred podcast streaming platform. It seems really simple, but it really is the best way to help us out, especially whenever you can actually write out a review. Great news! We have a new merch store that ships internationally and allows you to customize your merch on an endless array of products. You can head over to bit.ly/anklehighmerch to check it all out. If you want even more ankle high hot takes in your life and have a few dollars to spare, you can also join our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarsanklehigh. There's 3 different tiers to choose from: $2 toe rings, $5 anklets, and $10 limbo champions. Everybody gets monthly horoscopes written by yours truly. Anklets get bi-weekly Dysfunction Junction episodes, and limbo champions get all of that plus ad-free episodes, and they get added to our close friends list on Instagram. So head on over to patreon.com/thebarisAnkleHigh and join today. Until next Thursday, remember to be kind to yourself because the bar is ankle high.